the first thing that they see is of your house when when the house goes on the market is the pictures. So before they even come into to see your house, they're seeing the pictures on the internet, they're seeing videos, they're seeing maybe social media posts, things like that. And you want to make sure that whatever they are seeing is going to resonate with them.
Welcome to the Mortgages Made Easy podcast. Joined again by my dear friend, Sonia Margalef. Sonia is an amazing realtor with Coppice in New Jersey. And in fact, one of the things is that she's a 1.5%, top 1.5% of all the realtors in the country. Now, I'll say that as both my observation, but she actually has an award to prove it. We're going to talk about mistakes that people make, both as sellers and buyers, and things that we've encountered in our practice that people can so people can understand the process better. Let's start with sellers. Like, what's the number one thing that sellers need to know when they start thinking about selling their home?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dave, for having me here today. So yeah, I think the number one mistake that most sellers make is not pricing the house properly. Basically, pricing not strategically from day one, and that is important. That is something that the first days on the market are your strongest opportunity to capture the buyer's attention. And overpricing, I mean, if the house is overpriced, you're basically reducing the urgency, and you may be limiting showings. You may not attract as many buyers.
So, Sonia, how often have you heard, but my neighbor just sold at $1 million and my house is nicer?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I hear that very often. I do. But I always say every house is different. Although even though it's your neighbor and it's next to you or near you, that doesn't mean that your house is comparable to your neighbor's house. Their house might be smaller, bigger, might be in better condition, might have different features, additional things that add value to the house. So just because your neighbor sold his house for, say, $1 million, that does not mean that yours is going to also fetch $1 million.
Let's keep on going. So, so what I'm hearing from you is that strategic pricing is important, because
yes,
if you price too high, let's say your neighbor did sell at $1 million and you want $1.1 million. The odds are that if you start out with a price too high, your first weekend on the market will underperform. And what happens is, if you price appropriately, you get a bidding war and you might end up with more money. So it's sort of like non-intuitive, but what we see, you and I both have seen it many times, is that if someone prices low, they may end up with a lot more money than someone who priced the home high.
Yeah. And Dave, I wouldn't say low. I would say price competitively. Meaning that, of course, we don't want to leave any money on the table. I mean, I want to make sure when I price a property that we know what we're dealing with, the market dynamics, supply and demand, other comparable sales, everything. I take everything into account, and I want to make sure that the way we price a particular property is done right. It's not too much that we're going to scare some people away, and some we will limit demand, and it's not to price it too low that we will be leaving money on the table. It's really, at the end of the day, it's about creating enough demand that, to your point, will drive multiple offers. At the end of the day, we see that that's what really creates, the usually the higher offers.
Hmm. Now, there's another version of this that we
Yeah.
really should address right now, and that is there are sometimes some homeowners will go to two or three agents and ask them um, to come up with a proposal, and then what they'll do is they'll pick the realtor that proposes the highest sales price,
Yes.
and that is why is that a mistake?
Actually, it has happened to me, as a matter of fact, that I did not get a listing once a while ago, and the seller actually told me. She said, "I decided to go to the with another realtor because she gave me a much higher price, which I felt that was the right thing." And I said to her, I said, "I respect your decision, but at the same time." I don't know what your realtor, this other realtor, was basing it on. That was not based on the analysis that I did. But I said, best of luck to you.
What
What
ended up
happened?
happening?
What happened? Because of course I was curious. I wanted to, to follow that. What happened is it took that listing, that particular seller. I remember that happened a couple years ago. It took probably, I'm gonna say, I think she listed in February and she didn't sell until December. So it took her almost a year to sell the house. And the property had to go through probably three, I'm gonna say 2 to 3 price reductions, and it ended at the end of the day. The final purchase price for that property, as I remember, was slightly below the competitive price that I had suggested to that seller. Had the seller gone on the market with the price that I had at that time, that I had recommended, I was 100% sure she would have received multiple offers and definitely gotten a lot more. So anyway, lesson learned, I guess, for that seller. But yeah, it has happened to me, and you know,
And let me just put a plug in for Sonia right now, and really for the many, many great realtors I know, because I must know hundreds of realtors across the country. But for homeowners, buyers, and homeowners, really what you end up having is there are some amazing realtors around the country. And
yeah,
broadly speaking, you're going to pay the same amount of money whether you use your aunt's friend who does this very part time and really just dabbles in real estate, or you use an expert like Sonia. And so the companion to this story that Sonia is sharing is that you might as well start with the best realtor in town. And that's easy to find, or else you can call me, or you can call people, your attorney or your accountant, and find who the people who are really, really great. And that's who you want to use, bar none, because you're going to end up paying the same amount. You might as well get the best representation. Um, let's go on to the next one. And we were talking about failure to take advice. Let's talk about that. Like, give me an example. You were telling me earlier about somebody who painted in in a color that wasn't complimentary.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was an interesting situation. That was a seller that I was working with. I had just met with them, with the husband and the wife, and we did a walkthrough of the property, and I mentioned to them, I said, I think one of the biggest, one of the most important things that we can do to really make the house look great is to paint. We should really paint, and I'll help you. I'll help you with that. So anyway, long story short, what happened is the next time I came back to the house, maybe, I don't know, 10 days later, they said to me, "Oh, we went ahead already and we painted the house and we love this color so much." And I'm like, "Oh my God, but you cannot go and just pick any color that you like. Remember that you are selling and you're preparing the house for a buyer. So you have to, choose colors and do things that are going to appeal and resonate with today's buyers. And so they felt that, their opinion and their taste, and their preference of color would be the right one, and it was not. So,
So
and it,
let's generalize that a little bit. And
yeah,
let's say that they are working with a panel of experts. And we'll come back to that a little bit later if we have time. But they're working with a panel of experts. And one of the mistakes that I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen it, is that you hire the best people in the market. You hire a great realtor, you hire a great attorney.
of
Take
course,
their advice.
of
Take their
course.
advice. If the
They are
attorney,
the experts, Dave.
yeah,
They are the experts.
yeah. So, very often when you're selling a house, there's an inspection, and the inspection report notes some issues. Ask your attorney, ask your realtor, what's the best way of dealing with this? And that's why you have an attorney. That's why you have a realtor. Take
Yeah,
the advice you're given, because you're going to end up in a much better place than if you
yeah,
wing it yourself. Um,
definitely.
and we were talking about the paint, and that brings to mind something you and I discussed, which is first impressions. Why are first impressions important?
Oh my goodness, yes. First impressions are very important because think about it this way: the buyers that are looking to purchase a home, the first thing that they see is of your house when when the house goes on the market is the pictures. So before they even come into to see your house, they're seeing the pictures on the internet, they're seeing videos, they're seeing maybe social media posts, things like that, and you want to make sure that whatever they are seeing is going to resonate with them. You want to make sure that that house really looks amazing. It has the right colors, it has the right staging, because a home purchase is something that's very personal, it's very emotional. It's not just, a building with four walls. It's something that when the buyer comes in, they want to imagine themselves in that house. They want to see themselves living in the house. So for me, to partner with my amazing stagers, home interior decorators, it's very important because we want to make sure that we present the house in a way that is going to make that buyer feel at home, literally at home.
That's a great opening. I was at a earlier this week. I was at an open house, and one of the things that homeowners have a hard time with is they have their pride in the home, and
Yes,
and these homeowners committed what I consider two cardinal mistakes. And the
mistakes.
one is they uh, one of the homeowners was sitting in the house at her dining room table as people were walking in and out. And the second thing was there was a huge amount of clutter, but there was all of their personal mementos,
Yeah.
the portraits of their parents and grandparents and grandchildren and all over
Yes.
the place. Why is that
Yes.
a problem?
Well, yes, that and no, that's a very, very valid point, Dave. When people come to see a property with the intention of buying that property, and again, for us realtors and stagers, it's so critical to establish that emotional connection with the home. You want to make sure that the house is neutral. We call it like neutral in the sense that, whether there are, you want to avoid having any pictures of the current family that's living in the house, because you want to make it as easy as possible for that buyer to imagine themselves in that house. That's why we always recommend our sellers to remove anything that's personal, that shows pictures. Also anything that could be, religious, anything that can be political, because you don't know who's going to come to see your house or who has intentions of purchasing your house. And again, you don't want to, limit that, or affect that emotional connection, by having I don't know, by having things in the house that are going to, not resonate with that buyer,
Mm,
or even turn off the buyer. So
yeah.
yeah.
Let's flip over to um, buyers. And in my experience, one of the primary mistakes that people make right up front is they start touring homes. They start acting before they've been pre-approved on a mortgage. Have you run into that, and why is that a
Yes.
problem?
Yes, and that can be a problem because oftentimes what they think they might be able to afford, some have an idea, some are, use those calculators and they have an idea, but without having a lender like yourself, someone who can look at their finances and really run the numbers and tell them this is what I could pre-approve you for and this is what I can offer you. Without that kind of information, we might be, spending or wasting our time looking at the wrong houses. I typically try to avoid that by, having my buyers contact uh, the lender to really, determine what they can afford, what they can be pre-approved for, so that we focus our home search on the right homes, on the right price points. Also, that helps us, sometimes, like, say, for example, the buyer, you pre-approve the buyer for, say, $850,000. It doesn't mean that we're going to go out and look at houses that are priced up to $850,000. In this current market, depending on the kind of house that we're looking at, the kind of town, if it's a highly desirable town where multiple offers is the norm rather than the exception, um, in those towns, I mean, 850 is going to be your max number. So you better kind of get started maybe 10% below that number.
Yeah,
So it gives us really a very good, idea as to where we need to focus the search on, and really be very strategic about, like, like, sometimes that actually helps me, that pre-approval helps me explain to my buyers, I hear you, I know you're telling me you're interested in town X, Y, or Z, but the numbers, I'm showing you the market data, I'm showing you the pre-approval that, your lender, that Dave has given you, and these two things don't match. We
yeah,
have a problem. Either you go up, either he can pre-approve, Dave can pre-approve you for a much higher amount, or we have to look at other towns. We have to, you know otherwise it's not so simple. That it's not so simple, like,
yeah,
hey, let's look at houses up to $850,000. I mean, and by today's, whatever, everything that's happening on the market, it's getting harder and harder to even get anything at 850, for a
yeah.
family.
And one of the things that happens, and I've had this happen a number of times over the years, is someone calls me after they started looking at homes and they've looked at $1 million homes, but their budget only supports 850. But now
Right.
that they've looked at $1 million homes, it has some added features. Maybe it's thoroughly renovated, so they don't need to renovate, or maybe it is has that extra bedroom, or it has some other features, and now everything else they see leaves them a little bit disappointed, and that ends up making their process harder. While if
Yeah.
they while if they start in orderly fashion, in a strategic fashion, to use your term, a disciplined fashion, they end up in a much better place because, yeah, they may start at 850 and move up to 900,
Yeah.
but they'll be doing it with their eyes wide open and not
Correct. Correct.
not sort of willy
And
nilly.
you're absolutely right. I find it's always better to start lower rather than to start high and then go low. Because you're right, there is a disappointment that when they have seen houses that are a lot more expensive, and then they have to say, "Oh my God, but I cannot really go in that direction, I have to go much lower, the experience becomes very disappointing. And we don't want
Yeah.
that. We want to be realistic. We want to, because we want to be competitive. I mean, in this market, if you're not, you know, that if we're not competitive, we can write as many offers as we want. Quality is not, quantity is not going to compensate for a good quality offer that's going to win the house for the buyers. So yeah.
Yeah. So the other factor while we're talking about this is there's really two things I want to focus on from my perspective. And number one is to really drill down on the difference between what I can pre-approve you for and what you can afford.
Correct.
And that's huge because the what I can pre-approve you for, generally speaking, no, not always. You and I have a client right now who could afford more than he wants to spend. But what you can afford is often very, very important. People have some structural life things going on. They
Yes.
have their,
Yes.
however, maybe someone. I had one buyer one who had like almost an ascetic lifestyle, and he could afford like a very high percentage of his income because he really didn't have any frills. He didn't take vacations. He was just work and home, and that was it.
Yes.
But most people, they have their family and their kids and their pets and their hobbies, and they don't want to spend up to their absolute limit on the house
No,
because it
you're
will
right.
interfere with their life, and life is really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
No, you're
the other factor here that I think is very, very important when we're talking about this in terms of price and whatever is you could have two identical homes in two communities, and one home is, we're talking about it as, imagine one home has solar panels on the roof. It is thoroughly weatherproofed and insulated, and it's on a low tax town. And the identical house a mile away in a different town might have a higher real estate tax cost. It might have
right.
$500 a month or
Yes.
$1,000 a month in extreme cases of higher utilities and carrying costs. That's the downside of large loans, is somebody has to take care of them,
I agree.
large
Yeah.
ones. So at the end of the day, you know, when people focus on, well, how much can I afford to spend on a house? It really should be, what's my desired monthly payment?
Mm.
All in, carrying the mortgage, carrying maybe even the commute, right? Carrying everything. What am I
Yeah.
willing to spend on housing rather than how much can I spend on a house? Because, two houses for $1 million, there may be very different numbers in terms of what the carry is on those two houses.
True.
And
No,
you
you're
live a
right.
life of cash flow.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it can be very different depending on the town, just the property taxes. So this is a very, very good point. Also, oftentimes, I see this, we see like a beautiful home and, we're like, oh my God, great home, has a swimming pool. Well, again, it's added maintenance. Sometimes, I have buyers who don't really think a little bit about other things or other additional expenses. So it's important for me to point these things out and say, you know what, go back to Dave, speak with him, and run the numbers with him to make sure that you're able to afford this house versus the other house. I know that you like this house much better, but to me it seems like it might be a little bit more expensive on a monthly basis.
Mm,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
but you're right. You're making a good point, that, often, many buyers may not think about and just think about, oh, yeah, let's look at anything up to, $1 million or whatever, not really understanding the dynamics behind those monthly payments. Yeah. Oh, one thing that I also do often, especially if it's a bigger property, and to your point about, the utilities, I will ask the seller's agent if they can share with me, from the sellers, an approximate, cost monthly or per year cost of utilities if it's a much bigger home that you need to heat or that you need to cool, so that we know that.
Mm,
Yeah, I think
right.
those
Because
are
that's huge. That's
yeah,
huge.
yeah.
You know, one what happens with inspections? Because you would never, generally speaking, let a buyer buy a home unless it's been inspected or unless
Oh,
they could understand
absolutely.
the condition. So, what do buyers need to understand about inspections?
What they need to understand about inspections? Well, that's the one opportunity that you have in the process of purchasing the house, of knowing exactly what you're getting into, right? You have the right as the buyer to do as many inspections as you want. As a matter of fact, I remember during those COVID, at the beginning of COVID, and during the first 2 years of COVID, there was a lot of talk in the market saying, "Oh, we cannot do inspections because we couldn't go into the houses," or there was so much demand that people were just waiving inspections. I've never done this in my entire career. I've always advocated for my buyers to conduct as many inspections as they feel necessary, because it's important. You want to know what you're buying, because it's not like, you buy something and then you can bring it back to the store and return it. There is no return here. There is no
Yeah,
return policy. So you want to make sure, whether it's, of course, the home inspection is a no-brainer, but sometimes there are additional inspections that sometimes buyers may not think about, although by now they are becoming more and more common. For example, sewer line inspections. Many of the houses in New Jersey, and especially in the area where we're in, they were built maybe 80, 100, sometimes even over 100 years ago. And oftentimes the sewer lines may not be the newest ones. And so you want to make sure that you understand that that the sewer system is working properly, because you don't want to be in a situation where you get a sewer backup, and that's not a good thing. I started advocating many years ago for sewer line inspections, even before they became like now. Like, I think it's a very common inspection that people are doing now. I remember back then, people would say, What is that? Why should we do that? Never heard of that." And I'm like, you know what? Just do it. Trust me, just do it. And it's good. It's like, we call it like a colonoscopy, right? I mean, you don't do it every time. I mean, we have to do it more often, right? As the older we get. But with the house, you want to make sure that the house is
yeah,
in good condition, and that
yeah,
when you buy it, you don't have any surprises that you have not budgeted for.
yeah,
That, to me, that's very important. The inspection will reveal what's in great shape, what is not in so good shape, what is really major. And that's where, the buyers will know, okay, is this the right house for us or is it not? And that's
yeah.
something that we
And
always.
by the way, this is another instance where having a great realtor is absolutely critical, and having a great realtor, having a great attorney. But there are a lot of judgment calls.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get who buyers or sellers who they're determined to win. Any negotiation that they're going to do, they're determined to win. And sometimes they jeopardize the whole transaction or any goodwill that they'd have. You need to have someone who represents you, who can present what you need. First of all, push back at you a little bit and say, is this really important? Or,
Yeah.
let's focus on the things that are most important. And then also talk about how how to negotiate it so that everyone comes out ahead. rather than it becomes a confrontation.
Absolutely.
Um, you know, one of the things that you and I have spoken about a number of times over the years we've known each other is there are people who have a hard time making decisions. And tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh, decision making. No, well, it's true. It's true. Decision making, especially when you have so much money at stake, right? Especially, buying a house or selling a house. When especially a first time home buyer is buying their first house, and they have to make many, many decisions. That's why it is so important to me. I mean, number one, of course, that they're working with the right person, with the right realtor. That's absolutely a no-brainer. But I would say number two, what's super important is to get educated. Right.
So, so getting educated, getting making the right decision.
Yes.
Sometimes I've seen a lot of contracts in the last year where the buyer has said, "I'm going to have the house inspected, but I'm not going to nitpick. I'm only going to come back to you if it needs more than $20,000 in repairs. It needs
Mhm.
more than X dollars in
Yes.
repairs." Um, but what I just had a story, and you and I talked about it last week. We were helping a client, and he had gotten an accepted offer. He was a home buyer. He got his offer accepted, and then he sort of said, "Am I doing the right thing?" And second guessing, and he said, "Maybe I should wait 6 months." And my response to him was, "Well, look, in the town that you're buying in, real estate prices are going up between 5 and 10% a year. And so if you wait 6 months to buy
Yeah.
that house, it's going
Yeah.
to cost you another $40,000 or $50,000.
More
And
than it would cost you if
yeah,
you were to buy it now. Yeah.
than if you buy it now. And that's the answer, by the way, about people who are worried about interest rates right now, right? Because
Yeah.
someone might say, well, I really want to buy a house, but the rates are too high. I'm going to wait till the rates go down into the fives or and first of all, if they say into the fours, that may never, ever happen again. If they
We don't know.
say,
we I
yeah,
Yeah, we'll
we don't
see.
know. And if they say, well, I want it to go below 6, that might happen. But again, if they wait six
It
months,
might
they
take
wait a
some
year,
time.
during that time, the house price is going to go up. And then if the rates do go down that way, it's fairly
Mm.
likely that there will be more competition, and that'll drive prices up even more. So
Absolutely.
I'm a big advocate for people to take it step at a time, to make good decisions with expert advice. And I think that that's, really for both buyers and sellers where the rubber hits the road. Because whether you're a buyer, um, hopefully, if
Mm.
you're a buyer, you early on, you identify a great lender. I'll take credit for that, but
Of course.
identify a great lender, identify a great realtor, consider identifying an attorney up front. You're going to want a home inspection. Get the home inspector lined up so when you're ready to go, if you're going to want homeowners insurance, who's going to help you with homeowners insurance? You can wait until you have a loan commitment, but everything you do up front is going to save you time later. And I personally have won competitive bids where we bid a cash offer. We beat a cash offer. My client putting a mortgage in the other one because my client was absolutely ready. We could say we're closing in 3 weeks. We have
Yeah.
everything ready. We'll order title as soon as you sign the contract, and we'll close in 3 weeks. And the other buyer, even though it's a cash offer, they were nowhere. They had no ability to
Of
do that.
course.
Um,
Of
but
course.
let's get back to that panel of experts that we were talking about. When you hire a great realtor like Sonia, take Sonia's advice. When you hire a great attorney, that's what you're paying the attorney for. Listen, elicit advice. A paint color. Ask the
Whatever
decorator.
that may
Ask
be.
the
No,
realtor.
and
What's going to present my home better? If you're buying, what should we do about the inspection
Hmm.
contingency? Should
Yeah,
we waive it? Should we, how do we word it so we get it? The
yeah,
more you trust your experts, the better you're going to do long
of
term.
course. And the way I think you and I we approach these also with our clients is, it's a conversation. We are here to listen to the needs of the clients to make sure that we are delivering, it's a highly, I mean, this business we're in is a highly personalized business because not one single buyer or client is the same as the next one or the previous one. Everybody's different. Everybody has very specific, challenges, constraints, needs, goals. I mean, we need to really be super aware of what is important to them and help them in the best possible way. And so to your point about, the right expert panel, I say, the right panel or the right team, the right, you want to make sure you're working, with the experts. And I always tell my clients, look, come to me for anything that's real estate related. I will help you to the best of my ability. If it's something that is more, it's like a legal question, I will always say go to your attorney. If it's mortgage related, I'll say go to Dave and speak with him, because of course I cannot pretend that I know everything, but I will be able to direct that client to whoever he needs to or they need to go to. And make sure, because at the end of the day, really, it's about making informed decisions. There is so much, like we said, right? There is so much money at stake. You want to make sure that you're making the right decision. Whether that house is the right one for you or it's not the right one for you, you need to know that. You need, and I like to, I like to really point out to my clients, these are the great things about this house, but these are things that you may not be thinking about right now. But I want you to think about them now because later on, I don't want you to come back and say, oh, Sonia, what did we do? We should, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. I remember I had clients a while ago. They loved a house that was on, a little bit at the top of a hill, not too much, but it was like a steep, driveway. They had to go up, and oh my god, the house was beautiful. The view was very nice. It was, on a main road, like, close to a main road, but you couldn't really see or hear anything because it was elevated. But then I said to them, I said, I get that. I said, you love the house, you're in love with the view and everything, but think about, we are in New Jersey. It rains, it snows. Are you okay in the winter when you get a ton of snow and you're not able to leave the house until your snow removal service comes and removes that? And they were like, you have a good point. We didn't think of it because, it was July. It was July. We were not really thinking about snow. But, I like to bring up these things because I want to make sure that they are thinking holistically about the house and that the house is going to meet their needs in summer, winter, fall, spring, you name it. I don't care. It has to be, they're going to be there the entire year. And, I want to make sure that they know what they are buying, they know what they're getting into. And so far, I mean, I guess I must have been doing something right because I haven't really had anyone tell me, you know what, that house that we bought, that house, we don't really like it, which I
Oh,
actually heard a lot during COVID.
mhm.
Actually, the last maybe 2 years, I've been hearing more and more from other, colleagues and other people, like, oh, we bought the house, but we bought it in a rush. We really, at that time, there was not a lot of inventory. The rates were so low. We just rush. And we didn't realize that that was not the right house for us. And then 3 years later, 4 years later, they're now selling the house. Not
Mm.
my case. I mean, I'm happy that my clients so far have been happy because we do these with open eyes.
Sonia, thank you so much for joining me. This has been incredibly fun and incredibly valuable. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
all of our listeners will have tidbits that they pick out of this that will immediately serve them. Thank you so much for joining me,
Thank
and this
you.
has been a tremendous pleasure.
Thank you so much to you as well for the opportunity. Okay.